Alright, so this is Algebra 1 Semester 1, Chapter 2.5 and 2.7, literal equations, formulas, and proportions. So 2.5 deals with something called a literal equation. And a literal equation is just an equation that has two or more variables. So for example, y equals 2. This would not be an example of a literal equation, but if I did y equals 2x plus b, this is a literal equation. I have three variables. Or distance equals rate times time. I have multiple variables and within my equation, so we call that a literal equation. So when we do a problem with this, we have 4 equals 2m minus 5m, and they want to find what values for m is negative 2 and 0 and 2. So we have 4 equals 2m minus 5n. Alright, they're asking me for what values of m is when n is equal to blah 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 blah. So we have n is equal to negative 2, 0, and positive 2. They want to find out what m is. So the way that I want to find out what m is that I'm going to first add 5n to both sides. Remember, what I do on one side, I do to the other. So then I have 4 plus 5n equals 2m. After I do that, I'm going to want to divide both sides by 2 because I want m by itself. They want to know what values of m it is. So then what I do on one side, I do to the other. I'm going to leave it as this, and I'm going to say that m is equal to 4 plus 5n over 2. Alright, so the first scenario is that n equals negative 2. So we're going to substitute. So this is scenario number 1. So let's do this. Okay, so scenario number 1. I'm going to put in negative 2 for n and then find out what we're dealing with. So this is going to be 4 plus negative 10 over 2. Negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6, so it's going to be negative 6 over 2. So then m is equal to negative 3. That's our first scenario. Our second scenario is what happens if n is 0. So 4 plus 5 times 0 over 2. 5 times 0 is 0, so that's 4 plus 0 over 2, which is 4 over 2, which just leaves me with 2. So that's scenario number 2. And then scenario number 3 is what happens if n is positive 2. So this is 4 plus 5 times positive 2 over 2, which is 4 plus 10 over 2, which is 14 over 2, which is 7. So m equals 7. So the first thing that I did was I rearranged the equation so that I could find out what m is equal to by itself. Then I substituted the numbers they wanted me to substitute for n, and I got m equals -3 for n equals 2, m is equal to 2 for n equals 0, and m is equal to 7 for n equals to 2. So doing something like that is called rewriting your literal equation to solve in terms of 1. And it can be a little tricky at first, but we're basically applying the same properties that we apply to numbers, just with multiple variables. We just can't simplify it because we don't have any numbers that represents it yet, so we just leave it alone as this weird expression. So for this one, they want us to solve for x. And the thing about that is, we have no numbers. So when we solve for x, it's going to be a multivariable literal equation. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the r on both sides. So I have negative t minus r equals px. Then x is being multiplied by p, so I'm going to do the opposite operation, which is to divide by p. What I do on one side, I do to the other. So now I get negative t minus r over p is equal to x, where you can write it as x is equal to negative t minus r over p. I've also seen some people write it as negative t plus p, or r rather, over p is equal to x. They factored out the negative one. Okay. Then they give us a whole bunch of literal equations, and we call those formulas. And formulas are special literal equations that sort of deals with properties, either mathematical properties or rules, physics properties or rules, or chemical properties or rules. In this case, most of this is going to be math sprinkled in with a couple, one chemistry and one physics formula. So the first one they give us is a perimeter of a rectangle. Remember that a rectangle has 4 sides where opposite sides are congruent or the same. So this side would be the same as that side would be the same as that side. So the perimeter would be the sum of that. So L plus L plus W. When I combine them, I get perimeter is equal to 2L plus 2W. So that would be the formula for a rectangle. Perimeter of a rectangle. Circumference of the circle. Circumference is just basically the perimeter of the circle. And we go circumference is equal to, remember that this is the radius, halfway distance of the circle, 2 pi r, or if we have the whole thing from one end to the end, that's called the diameter. You can actually say that is the diameter times p, but they don't give you that in this equation. Then we have area of a rectangle. Again, we have a rectangle with a width and length. Area is the product of the width and the length. So length times width. That's an area of a rectangle. Area of a triangle. We have the height of a triangle, which is perpendicular to the base. Perpendicular means it forms a 90-degree angle. And we say that the area of a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. Then we have the area of a circle. Again, we have a radius of my weird looking circle. So the area would be equal to pi times the radius squared. And then we have distance traveled, so that's a physics one. So distance is equal to the rate times the time. Rate's usually like meters per second or hours per hour. Miles per hour. Temperature, so C is for Celsius, and it's equal to 5/9 the difference of Fahrenheit minus 32. So if you start off with a Fahrenheit degree, you put it in there and then you get your Celsius, or if you put Celsius over here and do some things to it, you can find the Fahrenheit. So those are very common formulas that you will see a lot. Okay. It says the height of a triangle is 20. What is the height of a triangle that has an area of 24 and a base of 8? So area of a triangle is equal to 1/2 base times the height. They want us to find the height, so we need to solve for h. There's two ways to do it. We can manipulate this equation first and then substitute, or we can substitute and then manipulate. Either way, it's going to get us there. So I'm going to manipulate first, so I'll do method 1. I want h by itself, so I'm going to multiply area times 2. What I do on one side, I do to the other. Base times the height. These guys cancel, so I'm left with 2a is equal to the base times the height. Then I divide by the base, and then I get that the height is equal to 2 times the area over the base. Then I can substitute. They tell me that the area is 24. So 2 times 24. And they give me that the base is 8. 2 times 24 is 48. 48 divided by 8 is 6. So then the height equals 6, and it's 6 inches. Height is equal to 6 inches. So that's one way to do it. You can manipulate your equation before you substitute, or you can substitute. So area equals 1/2 base times the height beforehand. So then this would be 24 is equal to 1/2 8 times the height. We're solving for h. That gives me 24 is equal to 4 times the height. Divide both sides by 4 because I want h by itself. Then I can say that h is equal to 6. Either way gets you there. And they're both equally correct. So here's is a word problem. Gray whales migrate annually, blah, 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 blah. Whale travels a distance of 5,000 miles each way with an average of 91 meters per day. About how many days does it take to travel? Alright, so this is a distance, rate, time. And in this case, time is t. And they want us to solve for t, so we can divide both sides by r. Or we can say that distance over rate equals time. They tell me that the distance is 5,000. They tell me that the rate is 91. which will give me my time in days. So for a whale to go 5,000 miles at a rate of 91 miles per day, well, it's going to take about 54.9 or 55 days. Or you can plug them in like I did earlier and say, okay, 5,000 equals 91 times t, and then divide by 91. Again, it will get you to the same place. Okay. And that's that section. All right, 2.7 deals with a proportion. A proportion, before we do a proportion, let's talk about ratio. Ratio is basically a comparison of two numbers or two things, two quantities by division, or a fancy way of saying fraction. I'm just going to say fraction. So 2 over 4, right? This is a ratio, one fraction. When we talk about a proportion is two or more ratios or fractions. Two or more ratios or fractions that are equal. Two or more ratios or fractions that are equal. They equal each other. So 2/4 is equal to 1/2. We can say that that's a proportion. Two fractions that are equal to each other. So when they want us to find a solution to a particular problem, and I know that they are equal to each other, I can, in this case, multiply both sides by 7 so I can get rid of the 7 down here. That cancels. X equals 28 over 5, which equals 5.6. Alright, that's one way of solving for it. I multiplied both sides by 7 because x was being divided by 7. The 7's cancel out. What I do on one side, I do to the other. 7 times 4 is 28. 28 divided by 5 is 5.6. Another way to solve these types of problems is to know the property of cross products or cross multiplying. If I have a number, a, or ratio rather, a over b, and then I have a proportion, c over d. Let's say I don't want to have these ratios. I don't want to have these fractions. I want to get rid of the denominators. Well, in order to get rid of the denominator, I need to multiply by the common denominator. And the common denominator of these two fractions are the product of these two fractions. So I would multiply both sides times BD, because that's the common denominator, and I want it to go away. The denominator, that is. So on the right hand side, the D is going to cancel out with the D over here. The B is going to cancel out with the B over here. And I'm left with AD is equal to BC. So what did I just do here? I cross multiplied, right? I multiplied, if I go back to it, A, B, C over D. If I was to cross multiply, right, we've done this before, that's BC, right? If I cross multiply here, that's AD. So what we just did was the proof for cross multiplying. This is the same thing as that. Cross multiplication, or to cross multiply, is just a way of getting rid of the denominators by multiplying the numerators by the common denominator. That's all we're doing. So by being able to cross multiply or use cross products, we are able to solve for various equations. So here we have, forgot it 2a, we have y over 3 is equal to 3 over 5. We can cross multiply. Boom, boom. So that's going to be 3 times 3 is equal to 5y. So it would be 9 is equal to 5y. And then I can solve for y by dividing by 5. And I can say that 5 is 9/5. If you want to take it a step further, you can say, no, I like 9/5. All right, multi-step proportions. They want to know what the solution is to that particular proportion. So we have n over 5 is equal to 2n plus 4 over 6. So we're going to cross multiply, right? We're going to multiply n times 6 and then 5 times the sum of 2n and 4. Here we're going to use a distributive property. So that's 6n equal to 5 times 2 is 10, 10n plus 20. I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides because I don't want to deal with negative n's. So that's going to be 6n minus 20 equals 10n. Then subtract 6n from both sides. The negative 20 drops. Very common mistake. Don't forget that that negative sign is there. 10 and 6 is 4. What's happening to n? N is being multiplied by 4, so I do the opposite operation, which is to divide by 4. What I do on one side, I do to the other. So n equals negative 5. Negative 5. I cross multiplied. I did the n times the 6, the 5 times the 2n plus 4. After doing that, then I simplified it. N times 6 is 6n, 5 times 2n plus 4 is 10n plus 20. Then I solved for n, I subtracted 20 on both sides. And then I subtracted 6n from both sides and then divided by 4 to get that n is equal to 5. Okay, that's a word problem. I'm not going to worry about word problems. And we are done. That is those two sections. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.